Chapter 13. You call her, said Barney. You should do it. She hates me, and you'll get her instant cooperation, you being such a big, blue-eyed boy and all. I don't like her. Well, I don't either. We could arm wrestle for it. Oh, sure, that would be fair. Goliath meets Delilah and breaks her arm off at the elbow. Geez, Ricos, you're confused. That was David and Goliath. Delilah was Samson's curvy little squeeze. The Bible does not say it like that. If I rewrote it in my own words, everyone would read it cover to cover, I'm sure. You call Lil, and I'll give you an example. You're on. There was a message on Lil's phone that advised she was visiting her cousin in Houston. She made the mistake of giving her cousin's number, which I wrote down. Let's hear it, I said. You didn't even speak to her. You said I had to call her, not speak with her. I called her. Pay up. Not so fast. Now you have to call her in Houston. You can't change the rules on a whim. Whim? You insult my integrity. Eventually, we called her together using the speaker function of the phone on Barney's desk. Barney identified himself to Lil's cousin and asked her politely if he could speak with Lil. She said yes and went to get her. Yes, Lil said when she came to the phone, rude as always, her specialty. Miss Munch, I'm Deputy Barney George. Deputy Ricos and I are calling about the murder of Norma Barker Bates. What does Deputy Ricos have to do with it? She and I are investigating together. Well, really, When are you returning to Terlingua? I asked, interrupting the whining I sensed was coming. I plan to return for Norma's funeral, she sniffed. I understand it's being held up by your investigation. It's being held up by the crime lab, not our investigation. There has to be an autopsy because she was murdered, I said, with a strong intimation that she was an idiot. I hope she got that. It's standard procedure, added Barney. We'd like to interview you on the phone right now. What do you want to know? Where were you this past Saturday evening? She sighed like we were holding up her life. I was right here with my cousin. All day? Well, of course not. We went out to eat, but I was with my cousin, who can readily testify to that. I have been here for several weeks. I wonder what it was like to be around Lil for longer than a few hours. I imagined her cousin was taking heavy doses of Prozac by now. Miss Munch, you are a close friend of Norma's? Yes, she was one of my best friends. I miss her so much, you can't imagine. Do you know if she had enemies? Asked Barney. He held up his hand, knowing what her answer would be, and assuming I'd lose it. I tried to look sweet and innocent. Lil hesitated a second, then proceeded. Her worst enemy would be Stephanie Ricos, of course. We caught her stealing, and she didn't take it well. Barney held up his hand again and gave me a warning look. I wasn't going to say anything. I was hushed by rage and a burning sensation in my stomach. Barney proceeded valiantly. Isn't it true that Dr. Ricos also hated you? Yes, of course. What's your point? What was your position at the nonprofit? I was the chief financial officer, she said as haughtily as if she were claiming to be the Queen of England. Is that treasurer or what? Asked Barney, slapping her down. I grinned at him. It's the position responsible for the money, keeping track of it, I mean. I don't mean to be critical, Barney said with a wink at me, but how would Stephanie Ricos steal money if you had been doing your job? I stood up and did a little happy dance. Lil huffed and puffed. She was indignant and wanted Barney to know it. Well, she wrote organization checks to pay her own bills. And for all we know, She pocketed all the cash donations and, well, Miss Munch, interrupted Barney, I believe she proved her innocence in court and you dropped your lawsuit. So I don't need to hear about that right now. What I need from you is names of people who might have wished to do her harm. Liz Lil was speechless for a moment. Barney and I high-fived each other across his desk. Finally, she said, well, there were other board members named in the suit. Perhaps one of them killed her. They all hated her. Do you know if she pulled a stunt like this anywhere else before she moved to Terlingua? I asked. Maybe someone with an old grudge killed her. I highly doubt it. But you don't know for sure one way or the other? She never mentioned anything to me about something like that. Did you continue to be friends after the lawsuit? Of course. Why do you ask? Well, I was just wondering about it. Stanner had told Barney they weren't. He came back into the conversation. When you come back to town, we'd like to see you in person. We'll make arrangements with you after the funeral. Well, all right, she said as enthusiastically as if he had said we were going to dig out her fingernails with an ice pick. Thank you for your cooperation, Miss Munch. We'll see you soon. Barney cut the communication. I don't look forward to seeing her in person, Ricos. Me either, I said. Maud used to call her Little Ass Munch, except to her face. Maud had been the board secretary. Barney laughed at the moniker, but he didn't say anything more. Having to interview Little Ass Munch in person was a good reason to get drunk. La Kiva is a bar built on a high bank of Terlingua Creek. At the massive wooden door, a flight of steps descends into a cave-like place. It's an unusual place, a popular hangout for locals, a must-see for tourists. I chose La Kiva because my friend Phil was working. I'd already forgotten my promise to quit. By the time I showered, dressed, and got to the bar, it was getting dark. From the parking lot, I could hear strains of drinking and cheatin' songs. Phil usually played jazz or blues, but customers had a say. La Kiva often has live music, bands from everywhere, but my favorites are locals and part-time locals playing original tunes. Terlingua has more than its share of talented musicians. I jumped down the steps two at a time. It had been a long day, and the way I saw it, I'd earned it. I told myself that drinking at a bar was healthier than drinking alone. Hey, Margarita, said Phil, a good-looking man in his early 40s. Before my uncle sold his rafting company, Phil had been a river guide for him. Now his brown hair had streaks of gray, and his face, though still tanned and handsome, showed a few creases around his eyes and mouth, probably from squinting and laughing day after day beneath the Big Bend sun. I don't think Phil liked it much that I'd become a regular drinker at his bar. I once told him, with all the know-it-all conviction of a 9-year-old, that getting drunk was for dumb losers. That was when he'd been drinking, and long before I started. Hey, Phil, the usual Margarita? Please. I hopped on a stool that was a wide stump of redwood tree, the seat polished to a high sheen. The usual was a Corona and a shot of gold tequila with lime. After he served me, Phil leaned his tan arms against the bar. How are you coming in the murder investigation? He asked. I threw back the tequila and, not bothering with salt or lime, then sipped the beer. Phil immediately removed the shot glass and set it in the sink. Oh, I said, it's slow. But she just got murdered Saturday night. Do you know anything I should know? She wasn't in here Saturday night, was she? No. Why? I thought maybe she picked someone up. No, she never did that. At least not here. There's always a first time. When another shot? Please. As he was pouring it, he said, "It feels weird to be serving liquor to a little girl who used to follow me around, constantly begging to go on river trips." I'm not a little girl anymore. Well, that much is evident. I still love to go on the river, I said, staring at his muscular arms. Maybe we could go sometime. I can still row. That much is evident, I said. He laughed. Seriously, would you go with me? I don't think so, but thanks for asking. Is it because of my age? No, it's not that. It's because my heart is so heavy it would sink the raft before we moved 2 feet down the river. What then? I'm just not ready yet, Phil. That's all I can say. It's only a river trip, no strings attached. You forget that I know how you guides are. I saw it all with my curious little eyes. Oh, yeah, I guess you would think that. We laughed, and he moved down the bar to serve another customer. Then someone played the Tennessee Waltz, and I froze. Patsy Cline, though long gone, moved me to tears quicker than you can say 8-second ride. That was our song, only because it was playing in the rodeo arena the first time we saw each other. With Kev and me, it was practically love at first sight. Even though I thought cowboys were redneck half-wits, and he thought students in the law enforcement academy were overgrown kids still playing cops and robbers. Never assume. First rule of police work. Good rule in general. Want to dance? I looked over to see Ethan Cook, a guy from my high school class. He was attractive, but there wasn't much to him. I dated him in high school. He was always more concerned about what I could do for him than what he could do for me. Sure, he might have grown up, but I didn't think he'd changed much. The local girls still talked. Hey, Ethan, how are you? Come on, let's dance. No thanks. I didn't think I would ever dance again. I loved to dance and did a lot of it with Kevin. But, like many things I did with him, it had been laid to rest when he was. Just one dance. No, thank you, but no. How long are you going to mope around? As long as it takes, I guess. Why don't you dance with somebody else? 'Cause you're the best looking girl in here. And besides, I like you. I've always liked you more than you know. I like you too, but I'm not in the mood to dance. Why don't you just wear black and cover your head? Phil, ever vigilant, walked up. Move on, Ethan. Go on now. Thanks, I said to Phil. If I thought you were in the mood to dance, I'd be dancing with you myself. You remember that, don't you? Of course. I'll never forget it. He had taught me to waltz when I was 8 by letting me stand on his feet. He said he didn't like kids, but I was crazy about him, and he was patient and kind. He took me on trips when my parents allowed it. He taught me the basics of rowing a raft before I was strong enough to hold the oars long enough to get us anywhere. I also had lain with him and his customers in the sand to listen as he pointed out the constellations, satellites, and other marvels of the night sky. He told gripping stories about the early settlers of the area and knew the uses of every plant. He had an encyclopedic knowledge of the Big Bend. Girls loved him, of course. Phil was heartthrob handsome, but tough enough that you knew he could handle any situation. Flooding rivers, wild animals, Even collapsing canyon walls would be no problem for Phil. Oh man, did he swagger. Better than John Wayne, and much nicer legs. You could stand on my feet again if you wanted to. I waltz now, thanks to you, but I'll take a rain check on that. As the liquor began to take effect, it seemed to lift some of the pain, or ease it, or whatever it did. I carried on ridiculous conversations with other drunks under the watchful eye of Phil. I felt safe with him there, which is why I drank in that bar. If anybody tried anything, he was on it before I was. As the bar emptied, Phil spent more time talking to me. Didn't you used to drink a lot? I asked him. Yes, I did. He watched me warily. I know what it's like to feel such heartache that nothing else matters and you don't care if you live or die. I lost a wife once, a long time ago. I knew that. Somewhere in the back of my alcohol-soaked brain, I knew I'd heard his sad story. Phil was still my hero, I realized. Previously, I thought that Phil had thrown his life away, but that night I realized he was exactly where he could do the most good. How did you stop drinking? First, I decided I wanted to. Then I started running and working out. I was nearly as compulsive about that as I was about drinking. But if you're concentrating on health, it makes it easier not to drink. You can't drink if you're a serious runner, and running is a whole lot healthier than drinking. I was on the track team in high school. I used to love to run. My advice, since you're asking, would be to start running. Some people told me I was running away from my problems, but the truth is they left me. It seemed like it was just me and the wind out there, and my problems came into perspective. They didn't seem so big anymore. When you're not drinking, you can think clearly, and you'd be surprised at how your whole life will seem different. I'm going to try it. Run over here once in a while and let me know how you are, okay? And I still want to take you out on the river. I guess I'm a little afraid of river guides, Phil. I'm a bartender now, not a river guide. Does that make it better? Hell no, I'm still a man. I laughed and gave him a hug. I didn't know if running would work, but I was determined to try it. When I finally arrived home, I took a long, hot shower to wash away the day and sober me up. It only made me more relaxed, not particularly sober. I put on women's boxers, an oversized t-shirt, and then collapsed into my favorite chair on the porch. I often slept in it when I couldn't face the empty landscape of my bed. Sheriff Duncan always told me that I must figure out a way to leave behind the violence, murder, and other terrible things people did to each other. He never said a word about using alcohol as an eraser, and I knew he wouldn't approve. I couldn't use the day I'd had as an excuse for drinking. Besides, it wasn't that.